So before we jump into the serious stuff today, I need to make a confession, and here it is. I hate Christmas lights. I hate Christmas lights. They are the worst, right? I love looking at them, right? Like I love that part of Christmas lights. I mean, that's great. I remember when our kids were younger and we loved driving around looking at lights, but putting up my own lights, I mean, I'm done, right? I'm done. Christmas lights, I believe, are one of the biggest scams ever invented. Every year, right? I do what you do, right? I take them down very carefully. I roll them up nicely. I've even bought things to help roll them up. And I put them in a plastic tub very carefully. And then like you, next December, right? I pull them out. Half a strand is dead, right? It's never just one bulb. I mean, I could live with one bulb. I could manage one bulb. And those little things that help you find, they don't work. Like they don't work. And usually you just get this random section or the whole string is out. It's like you put the lights away and they hold a meeting in the box over the summer and they've said, hey, all at the same time, let's fail and ruin Christmas. I feel like that's how this is. And, we've all done the shaking thing to try to get them to come back on. And I just tell you, I think Christmas lights, they're just spiritual warfare. That's what it is. And I've already had somebody do this. Some of you, you're going to catch me after service and you're going to say, hey, Laren, if you do this or if you buy these particular lights, you're going to come up to me and you're going to say that. And I'm going to nod my head. And I'm going to agree, or at least look like I'm agreeing to your advice. But I'm not going to listen to you because you've been deceived. So this year I just had enough. And I decided that I'm done, but right, like there is pressure. All of you that live in a neighborhood, you still got to, everybody else has lights. And so you still got to make sure that your house looks good. There's pressure from your family as well. And so this Christmas, I did what any wise pastor would do. And I went to our tech team. And I said, if anybody knows how to make lights behave, it's that crew behind the booth. And so I said, hey, guys and ladies, you've seen those houses where the lights, they sync with the music and it's all that, it's amazing and how awesome. Could we do that at my house? Could you guys figure out a way to make that happen at my house? And they said, Laren, we got you. Check this out. Right? That's legit, right? I don't know whose house that is, but they did a really good job of decorating, right? Now, here's the thing with Christmas lights. I really do love them, but the thing about Christmas lights, because they really do make everything beautiful this time of year, right? When you're driving through the neighborhood and people have their houses lit up. And I mean, just to me, this Christmas season glows. It feels warm and it feels inviting when houses are all lit up and, you got lights on a Christmas tree. It's so picture perfect. It looks like that's how the world should be. But I also know that as beautiful as this season looks, especially when there's snow on the ground, I also know that for a lot of people, that the brightness doesn't always match what's happening on the inside, right? That we can have lights on our houses and lights on our trees and even those lights on the inflatable Santas that are trying to survive the wind in the middle of winter. But on the inside, there's a lot of people that just feel worn out. And this time of year, a lot of people feel drained and feel stretched way too thin. And Christmas, as great as this season is, I think it has a way of making that gap between what's on the outside and what's really happening on the inside, making that gap even wider. And some people, and maybe you're one of them, I think walk into December exhausted, right? Already discouraged and already overwhelmed. And so to me, I know that so many walk into this season filled with anxiety. So much anxiety, and what's so interesting to me in our culture, right? We have more access and more information about mental health than any generation in history, but at the same time, right, the statistics bear it out. We're more afraid, we're more stressed out, we're more anxious, we're more lonely, we're more unsure of ourselves than ever before. But many people do what maybe we all do at times. We put on a smile, right, on the outside, and the hurt is deep on the inside. And I'm sure you see it in some of your coworkers. I'm sure you see it in some of the marriages around you or some of the parents that are trying to hold things together. You see it maybe in families that are just trying to make it through the season. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, I think most of us know what that feels like. To look fine on the outside, everything's good, the lights are on, but yet at the same time feel empty on the inside, right? Because you can smile while still carrying on, dealing with things that nobody sees. And I think many times we just don't even know what we're missing. So often, so many people just don't know what they're missing. And I think there's this tendency or this mindset, well, I just need a break, or I just need a getaway, or the New Year's coming, and I just need a reset. But if you try that for too long, that really never gets to the issue. Because a break or a getaway or a reset, I think it can numb things for a moment, but it really doesn't get at the heart of things. It doesn't get at anything underneath. And so the question to me as we head into this Christmas season that I've been wrestling with my own mind and heart is, then what do people really need? Because I don't need another distraction. You don't need another distraction. I don't need anything temporary. You don't need anything temporary. I don't need something that fades. You don't need something that fades the minute real life kind of sets in. And I think a lot of people walk into this Christmas season and in their minds they're thinking, oh, well, this gift or this moment or this experience is going to fill that gap that I feel between, what people maybe see on the outside and what I'm really struggling with on the inside. But I think that what we're longing for, what we really need, it's so much deeper than what we can wrap or what we can plan for. And to me, this is the heart of the Christmas story. That the creator of the universe gave us a gift that nobody ever thought to ask for, but everybody desperately needed. And it wasn't a gift that just fixed things on the surface, but it was a gift that rescues us from our darkness. And when you read John's gospel, John's account of Jesus' life, right? John was one of Jesus' disciples. He was there. He witnessed it. And later on in his life, in his old age, he wrote down what he saw. And you can almost, I think, feel it. As John's writing out his account of Jesus' life, you can almost feel that as John is looking around at the world that he's living in, that he sees it. It's a world that seems confused and tired and trying to make sense of life. And so, again, years after Jesus' death and resurrection, John finally sits down to write his account of Jesus' life. And in my mind, I just kind of picture people for years and decades going to John, like, John, tell us what you saw. And John, you got to tell us what you heard. John, are you ever going to write this down? What was it really like to be there with Jesus? And at this point, Matthew's already written his gospel, and Mark, who got his from Peter's perspective, Luke, he had done all his research and gathered all the information and wrote his account. And so those were already in play. But John, in a way, he zooms all the way out as he starts his account of Jesus' life and starts here. And he says this: in the beginning, the Word already existed, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And just to kind of pause right there after that verse, to me it's important because in order to understand what happened at Christmas, you have to understand these opening lines of John's gospel. Because when John says in the beginning, John's reaching all the way back into Genesis chapter 1. He's intentionally echoing those first words of Scripture. He's saying, hey, the story I'm about to tell you doesn't start with Bethlehem. It doesn't begin with shepherds or angels or a manger. John says, the story that I'm about to tell you, it begins before time began, before creation, before light ever existed. That this is the eternal God stepping into his own story, the creator entering into the world that he himself designed. And so as John here, he calls Jesus the Word, and that single phrase for Jesus the Word, it's so loaded because John isn't saying that, hey, you know what? Jesus came to explain God. Well, John's saying that Jesus is God explaining himself. That Jesus is God revealing himself to the world. That Jesus is God making himself unmistakably clear that the Word, as John puts it, it's not an idea and it's not a philosophy. It's not a principle that maybe you should try to live by. No, John says the Word is a person and his name is Jesus. And he continues, he says, he existed in the beginning with God. He was there from the beginning. And he created everything through him. And nothing was created except through him. And the Word, Jesus, he says, gave life to everything that was created. And his life brought light to everyone. And again, I just want to pause there because John, it might seem like it, but John's not being poetic. He's being really clear. And maybe if you're like me, my tendency kind of as I read through that and I think, oh, hey, he gave life and that's great. Jesus helps me live a better life and Jesus improves things in my life. But see, that's not what John is saying as he writes this out. John isn't describing Jesus as somebody that enhances your life. He's not saying, hey, Jesus, he's the one that's going to kind of top you off when you're feeling low. Now, John, he goes so much deeper than that. He says, this Jesus, this Word, this one that I'm talking about, life starts with him. That life doesn't exist without him. That life flows from him because, as John puts it, he is life. It's not even just that Jesus gives life. He's saying Jesus is life. He's not the battery just that's going to keep you going. He's not the backup when things kind of get out of hand. He's not the boost that you need when you feel drained. But John says, no, Jesus, he's the source. He's the starting point. He's the foundation that everything rests on. Anything alive and anything meaningful finds its life in him. And here's why that matters for you and I. Because if we kind of just read those words, hey, Jesus gives life. If that's where we stop with that idea, what happens when the circumstances of life kind of start to fall apart, right? If Jesus just gives life, what happens when the diagnosis comes back and the relationship ends and the job disappears or your kid is struggling and as a parent you can't fix it? If Jesus just only gives life, what happens when the anxiety won't quiet down or when you lose somebody you love? See, if Jesus only just gives life, and then we get hit with some of that stuff, it's really easy to think, well, then maybe Jesus stepped away. Maybe Jesus kind of stepped back a little bit because what What am I dealing with this right now for? And to me, this is the point that John wants us to get us to, that if Jesus is life, if he is life, not just gives life, if he is your life, life can shake you because it will. But it doesn't have to take you out. That if Jesus is life, plans can fall apart because they do. But it doesn't have to mess with who you are at your core. That if Jesus is life, the grief, it can hit because that's how life is. But when it does, if Jesus is life, you're not left without hope. And so that's why he addresses it this way. He's saying that when Jesus becomes your source, it gives you this opportunity to see things differently. You start to have some direction of where to go in life. You start to have hope that isn't tied to the moment that you're in or the circumstances that you're going through. And he becomes this steady thing that, as we're about to see, that as he talks about darkness, he becomes a steady thing that darkness can't handle. And John, as he's saying this, he's not talking about some hidden, inner feeling. No, for John, what John is getting at, that Jesus, that this season, what it's meant to remind us of is that Jesus, he shows up in the real life, in real moments, in the way that you live. And John says this, he says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. And as I read that, I think John's words get really personal. Because the darkness that John talks about there, you know what darkness is, right? And he's not just talking about sin. I mean, to me, darkness is anything that you and I don't want to face. Right? Those things in our lives that we kind of want to push aside. Some of that stuff in our lives that we would kind of just rather ignore. But the darkness, no matter how hard we try, if we allow that darkness to stay in our lives, it doesn't stay quiet, right? That stuff that you and I, because we're human, we try to ignore it. It's eventually going to find a way to speak. And the weight that maybe we're trying to pretend that isn't there, that darkness, it just has a way to show up in other places in our lives. That darkness, if we kind of hide it and keep it hidden, and no, I don't want anybody to see this, it leaks out in our moods. I mean, it leaks out in our reactions, in how short our fuse is. It even shows up in the way that we have a tendency sometimes to pull back from people because I don't want you to see the real me and some of the real things that I struggle with. It finds its way into the thoughts that keep us up at night. And we're human, and I think we believe that, if I can just hide this, it's going to protect me from dealing with it and hiding something. It's going to make it a little bit easier to handle. But the thing about hiding something, when you hide that darkness, it actually gives it more power. It just does. Because to me, what stays hidden stays unhealthy. What stays hidden stays unhealthy. And that's true not because you're weak or not because you're broken, because you and I were never meant to carry some of these things alone in the dark. And to me, this is where the light of Jesus becomes more than a metaphor that John uses here, because when his light touches those places in our lives that we've been hiding, we've been trying to ignore, it doesn't expose shame. It actually exposes us to healing. It does what light always does, showing, hey, this is what's really here, but you don't have to be afraid of it anymore. See, Jesus, as the light, when we allow him in, it can reveal things so that he can heal things. And it brings things forward so that they can actually lose their grip on us, because you can't heal. You and I can't heal from the things that we try to keep hidden. And so Jesus, as John is talking here, he's saying that this Jesus, this one, this light, this source of life, that he meets us there. That Jesus wants to bring some clarity to some of the things that maybe have been confusing. He wants to bring hope to the places that you thought were dead. He wants to enter into our lives. And to me, this is the best part of the gospel, that Jesus, he didn't just shout directions from the sky. That as we read this Christmas story, Jesus came close. There's an old fable I came across in the last week, and to me, it explains this so well. The fable goes this, that a farmer once watched a group of birds that were caught in a winter storm. And the birds were terrified. They were slamming themselves against a locked window. They were desperately trying to find safety. And right behind them was a warm, lit barn with a door wide open, but the birds, for whatever reason, wouldn't go in. And the farmer, right, he saw this happening, and he did everything he could. He waved his arms, and he called out, and he said, tried to guide them. But the more he tried to do that, the more afraid they became. And then he finally realized, the farmer realized, well, it's because they won't go in. They won't listen because they're scared of me. They don't understand me. They won't trust me. And the farmer said to himself, well, if only I could become one of them, then I could show them the way. And John, who witnessed with his own eyes, says that's what God did. It says this, so the Word became human. Jesus became human, flesh and blood. And what did he do? He made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. And to me, that's it. That's the gift that in the first century, and I think so often in our generation, that no one saw coming. Here, the creator of the universe stepping into our world and essentially stepping into our darkness. I mean, that's the gospel story. That Jesus is life and came to bring light to the darkest parts of our lives. And I think what's been kind of hitting home for me lately, if you were here in the month of November, we were in a series where we were talking about hearing from God and listening from him. And I think one of the things that God taught me most through that season, and I've been kind of open and honest that getting quiet and kind of blocking, all the distractions out, it was, and at times still can be a difficult thing for me. But here's what I found, and I think here's some of the things that God was speaking to me. Sometimes my refusal or my struggle to get quiet, to get alone, to just listen to him, I think it's at times because sometimes I'm afraid if I get quiet and get alone, I'm going to be afraid of the things that he might point out, that I'm too afraid to admit. Some of those dark areas that I've tried not to deal with, or I've tried to ignore, or I've tried to just pretend like they're not there. But to me, as I read John's account, John starts off saying, no, Jesus is life. And when you lean into that and you let his light shine into those areas, you're opening yourself up to healing that only he can provide. You're opening yourself up to healing that only he can do, but you've got to be willing to let him shine his light. And so if I could just give you one thing, that as we head into this Christmas season, there's going to be lots of other things to take your attention, to distract you, and some fun stuff. Like what Christmas is, what this season is kind of about, the lights and the presents. I mean, that's still good stuff. But if I could just ask you to do one thing, what would it look like for you to, in your quiet time, maybe this week, for you to ask Jesus the question, Jesus, what's one dark area in my life that I've been trying to hide? What's one area that I've tried to not only keep away from you, but I've tried to keep away from the people that are closest to me? Would you ask Jesus to shine a light on a place in your life that you've been avoiding? An area that needs some attention. Maybe it's a fear that you haven't dealt with. Maybe it's a habit that When you really think about it, it's been pulling you back. Maybe there's a wound, right? And it was caused by what somebody did and what somebody said or a situation. And you've just tried to pretend it's not there. Maybe there's a place that you just, for whatever reason, you've been keeping it in the dark. What's that thing that you keep pushing aside? What's that thing that deep down it's not healthy? What's that thing you've been avoiding because, right, it just feels easier not to look at it or deal with it? And what if you would just start there? That one place, that dark place that you've tried to just hide and keep hidden because you certainly don't want other people and certainly don't want Jesus to see that. But that's the beauty of the Christmas story. That John, and he puts it so well, that Jesus came to be your life and shine light into the darkness because the darkness cannot overcome it. And so would you be willing to pray that prayer, Jesus, what's that dark place that I've been hiding, I've been holding back, I've been trying to keep from you, trying to keep from others, that needs healing, that needs your light, that needs what only you can do. So if you would, just right where you're at, would you bow your heads, close your eyes? I'm sure in a room this size, and people joining us online, there's some that are carrying some real darkness right now. It might be some anxiety that just doesn't seem to quiet down, or grief that just feels so fresh, and maybe a relationship that's in a tough place. Maybe for you there's a situation you've been trying to hold together on your own, or maybe you, as you come into this season, you're just tired. But if that's you, and you'd say, you know what, Laren, yeah, there's something in my life where I need the light of Jesus. I need it to break through. I would just ask you with heads bowed and eyes closed, if that's you, that you'd be bold enough just to slip your hand up right where you're at so I can pray for you. Say, yep, that's me. I need some light to break through. Dear Heavenly Father, for those that raise their hand, God, I know that the heaviness of likely what they're feeling. God, because in all of us, that human nature that kind of wants to keep those dark places dark, don't want to admit that we struggle, don't want to admit that we don't have it all together. God, I'm thankful that John put things the way he did. And so for those that raise their hand, God, I pray for healing for them. I pray that your light, that they'd see it in a way that, man, that's where hope is. That's where refreshment is. That's where something new can happen, God. And that they would just, this week, this season, over the next couple of weeks as we move into Christmas, God, that they would really, truly open up their hearts to you. So God, just be with them. And with heads bowed, eyes closed, just want to say it. You might have walked in this morning and church, Jesus, it isn't your thing. In fact, you're not even sure why you're here. You're not even sure why you're watching online, but you're here. I can't let you leave without telling you that your Heavenly Father loves you. And He loves you so much, He had to communicate it in a way that is unmistakable, and that's He sent His Son to die on a cross for you. And you might not have all the answers yet, and you might not know what's next, and you might still have some dark places, but that doesn't mean that you can't take a first step. And that first step can happen with a simple prayer. Something that you can pray, something that goes like this. You can pray it in your own heart. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for sending your Son to be a light to the world. Forgive me of my sins. Today I choose to follow you. And so God, I just pray that as we move over the next few weeks that, we're going to do the things that we enjoy about this season, but ultimately, God, I pray that this would be a season of transformation. That we walk towards Christmas Eve with like just a hope of not just what we want to happen in our lives, but God, a hope of what you can do in us and the change that you can do in us. So God, I pray that this season would be one that we walk away from just knowing that your light made a difference in us, that your light brought some things to life, that your light brought some things to our attention that maybe we allowed just to kind of sit there. God, whatever you need to do in this season, God, I pray that we'd be willing to let you do it. So God, we love you. We praise you. Amen.